One of the most common questions and reasonable questions I get asked is, what is this mix going to cost? What is this recording going to cost? And it is such a hard question to answer. I have a $100 minimum and I charge by the hour. And I do it that way because it seems kind of the most fair. Of course, some people do flats, like flat rate stuff. But I don't like to do that because it really forces you to charge everybody kind of the worst case scenario rate, because you just cannot really know going in what, say, a mix. We're talking specifically about mix here. I'll move into tracking. You can't anticipate what a mix is going to need. You can't do it. You can kind of listen to it, and if the tracking's really good, you can kind of tell, but that's frequently not the situation, right? And you're just guessing anyway until you put your hands in a mix. Some sound that you think was fine going in, you were like, no, this sounds good. This is how I want it to sound. And then all of a sudden, context or whatever, something about the way you're viewing it changes, I guess. And then it's like full on war. I don't like charging flat because unless you just want to like screw yourself time and time again, it forces you to kind of like estimate on the high end. Otherwise, you burn yourself, and you're not going to do that too many times because you'll regret it, So I charge hourly. My quote for a mix is 2 to 6 hours. It's not common for me to have a mix go more than 6 hours. 6 hours feels long in the tooth. Every once in a while, something's just war, and it can go real long. I mean, per song. Of course, when you're mixing a batch of songs, there are economies of scale that really bring that into focus, right? If you have 5 songs were kind of recorded the same and they're mostly the same all the way through, that first song, let's say, takes 6 hours to mix, and there's a lot of details I'm skipping I'm going to get back to. The rest of the songs are going to take 1 sometimes, right? But then it averages out to be 2-3 hours mixed. So there's massive economies of scale. But that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about guessing and why things are so hard to estimate. First thing is, when you get into tracking, people are like, how long is this going to take? I just want to do a demo. And the answer is, oh, there's a cat. The answer is, I have no idea how long your tracking is going to take. It depends almost entirely on you. I have to do a certain amount of setup. And I know about how long that setup's going to take approximately, like with drums and a bunch of guitars and stuff or whatever, the thing is, it's going to be a couple hours of setup. If you really want to do the thing, you can take more time. But so that's how long it's going to take me. The rest of it is just how long it takes you to get the performance that you want out of yourself. And that's the part that takes the time when you're tracking, is the actual tracking. I have no idea how long that's going to take. If I haven't worked with you, you might know how long that's going to take. If you've done recording before, you know how good you want things to sound, and you know approximately how much work you've put in previously to get the results that you desire. And it's fine. There is no right answer to that. You should do as many takes as you feel like you need to do. I have no idea how long that's going to take you. There's no way for me to know that. And then when it comes to mix, people don't think about it this way, but so much of mix is still dealing with errors in the musician's playing or errors in tracking, right? If the tracking's bad, of course, you have more work to do. Maybe you got to reamp, you got to throw samples in. But most of the time, what you're doing, especially like compression, forget the distortion aspect of compression, right? A lot of times you're choosing a compressor not just for the way it fixes dynamics or changes dynamics. You're choosing it for the distortion it imparts, right? Ignoring that, you're compressing because some notes are too loud and some notes are too quiet. That is a correction of performance. A perfect musician in a perfect world, they play everything as loud as it needs to be. They mix each note on the guitar so that the notes they want heard get heard in the way they want them to be heard. So even EQ is frequently a performance correction because people with bad touch, they just don't have as good a tone and stuff like that. And a lot of times you're kind of working that out. If it's more than just like shelving some treble up and some bass down or something like that. And that's kind of where you spend your time in a mix. It's, dynamics and EQ, and eventually get to the point where you push the faders up to the place where they need to be, which kind of ends up being last for me, but everybody does their own thing. The big one in a mix is repair. Repair is very expensive. The lesser of these repairs actually being like drum replacement, which is not that big a deal. But mostly, forget tone, mostly when I'm replacing drums, I'm not doing it because I couldn't make the snare or the kick or the whatever work. Not always, but usually I could make them work. What I'm doing it for is because some of those hits are too hot or too quiet, or the dynamics are just generally erratic. And I can correct that, right, with compression. That's what that's for. But the tonal cost of the amount of compression I need is too great, right? It impacts the sound too much in a negative way. We lost Greg. He ran away. Actually, I had to move, and he was disappointed in me for that. Anyway, because the cost of the amount of compression that I feel is necessary to get it, whatever the piece is, to sit where I want it to sit and where I'm not losing some kicks or some snares are just like popping your ears out and others are just hiding in the mix or whatever instrument it is, it's the same. That's why I'm replacing. I always make samples of a kit that I'm recording, so I try to replace with samples from that kit in that session if at all possible. But again, this is the cost of a suboptimal performance, right? Time correction is the same thing. Grid, that's the cost of a suboptimal performance. You're not trying to change things. You're trying to put it where it should have been in the first place. Gridding can be the worst. It depends. Tuning's not that bad. It could be quick, or even just like a light dusting of auto-tune. What really gets hard and expensive because it's time consuming is when you have to grid things like an acoustic guitar, because you can't time stretch. I used what's called Elastic Audio in Pro Tools. It's called something else, and all the others, everybody calls it something slightly different, to do a lot of correction, but that doesn't always work. Like in bass, you can't do a lot of stretching of audio or compressing because it sounds terrible, so you do cutting. Bass isn't too hard, though. What's terrible is when you have to time correct like an acoustic, because the computer's not going to read the transients right, so you're going to have to go in for every hit in the entire song and tell the computer where that transient is, rather than just relying on it to find it. And depending how far somebody is off and you try to like auto fix something, the computer will just put them in the wrong place if they're off too far, depending on a number of settings that you have control over. And that's not that uncommon, and you can kind of like half auto it, but you need to babysit every minute of the process. And it's just like you can easily get into an hour just having to correct an acoustic performance if it's kind of bad and the circumstances aren't just exactly right for using the computer to autocorrect it, which is frequently the case. That's expensive. That's where you lose time. You lose time in repair. So I can't tell you how much it's going to cost, because those factors are dependent upon you and vary widely from a group of people to a different group of people. And I don't want to overcharge 9 people so that I don't get my ass cooked on the 10th, right? That's just the determination I've come to. A lot of people do it differently. So yeah, if we've ever worked together once, or even if you have other prior recording experience with somebody else, you're going to have a pretty good idea of how it works for you. I guess that's the point I haven't really got to, the broad point that it is such an individual process, not just how long things take, but even how you approach all of the same jobs that happen in recording a song. You approach them differently with different people because it just works better for them. So it is a wildly individualized experience. Every one of them is different. And you see other people record songs and sometimes you'd be like, why would they do it that way? That's just what works for them. And that's all that matters, right? This is a recap from me. I don't know how long it's going to take. I can't know. I can know once I've worked with you. I will say this. It's probably going to take less time with me than it takes with other people. I've seen people make finished sounding albums for $300. And I have seen people frequently spend $500 per song. We just have to find out. But can I tell you exactly what you want to know? No. I don't know how to be fair without charging based on time. And I don't know how to estimate time on a project with people I've never worked with before. It's impossible to do. So, good luck.